took my cat outside this morning. We thought it was going to be 80, 85. Got outside. It was 60 and breezy, and he didn't want to stay outside. But I was reading a G.I. Joe. I brought my G.I. Joe comic, my clipboard, my pen, my frown, also breakfast, seat cushion. So I let him just sit by the door, nicely asking to go back inside while I read half the comic.
We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read. Oh. Hey, 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 I see the bad moon rising. I see trouble on the way. It's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comics podcast. Now, if you're new to the show, you can find out all of the details and previous episodes over at talkingjoe.co.uk. Today, we are continuing our look at the Disavowed era of G.I. Joe with issues 34 and 35, a two-parter named Bad Moon Rising from Devil's Due, the fall of 2004. That's not to say it's the demise of 2004. It's an American way of describing autumn. That's for our many listeners in Macau, South Africa, and Hong Kong. Thanks for listening. Now, joining me to discuss Bad Moon... I almost said dismiss, but it might not be far off. Joining me to discuss Bad Moon Rising, it's my two co-presenters. First up, Howling at the Moon, it's a real American werewolf. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, listeners, and hello, Mark, and hello, Mark's puns.
It's good to talk to you, Tim. And next up, it is our resident lunar-tic. Luna, get it? It's Jay, G.I.J. Jay Cordray.
Howdy, Joe fans. NWO Wolfpack for life. Oh! Tim's going, what the hell is he talking about?
Just gonna talk about comic books.
Very good. And just before we get into the next one, I'll just remind listeners who are listening to these Devil's Due episodes that we just recently, and by we, I'm talking about the royal we, me, spoke to Josh Eggerbean off of the Kickstarter After Action report, talking about Volume 2, which is the Devil's Due era book. So if you're into all things Devil's Due, check out their Kickstarter.
Did they have any kind of release date in mind for that? Do you know?
They're running the Kickstarter until just after JoeCon, so towards the end of June. After that, it will continue to be, I think, available through their website, afteractionreport.net, I think that is.
Oh, okay. So within a couple of months, it's not like a Hasbro pre-order.
No, they've got about 80% plus done. So there's just some fine tuning and finishing up. So after it's been back, there isn't a huge amount of extra editorial leg work to do. So they're hoping to get it out something like October, I believe. So yeah, it won't be too long a wait.
If I can just correct a word there, it is a JoeCon, but it is called Joe Fest.
Thank you, Tim. Okie dokie, let's talk Devil's Due comics. So, issues 34 and 35 were created by Brandon Jerwa. Brandon Jerwa. Pencils, Tim Seeley. Backgrounds, Jason Millet. Inks, Cory Hamscher. Colours, Brett R. Smith. Letters, Dreamer Designs. Editor, Mark Powers. Graphic design, Mike Norton. Production assistant, Sean Dove. Military consultation, Andrew Swenson.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Issue 34. Each of these only has one cover. There's no A cover, B cover. Issue 30.
Each of them has three covers, Tim.
Really?
Cover A, cover B, and cover C.
Really?
What's the C cover? I have 2 for each of them.
Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna do that again. Hold on. We're just gonna do this again. Hold on. I'm going to mycomicshop.com and I'm clicking on. This is where I look at covers a lot of the time.
Yeah, they're definitely on yojo.com, but the resolution is
Not very good. What are the C covers, Mark?
Wait, 34 has variants?
So 34 has got cover A is Hawk in a wheelchair. Cover B is Graham's Crackers exclusive, which is just a red Cobra logo on a black background. And cover C is a second printing, which is just it's got an interior panel blown up onto to be a full page image. It's
that's the worst. That's the worst kind of cover.
It's the cover of Cobra Commander, sort of looming over Baroness with lots of snakes hither and thither.
Okay, now I see that there's a previews exclusive for 35B, and that is mentioned on the inside cover, inside front cover. All right. Anyway, going back a step, I'm just going to talk about A cover and A cover because if it's a store variant, technically yes, that's a variant cover, but that's not something that the general public has a good chance at getting. It's not like Devil's Due made A and B for everyone. So anyway, 34 main cover is it's a black and white. Hawk's sitting in a wheelchair. He's in his dress greens. He has an American flag draped over his lap.
Disgrace.
He's in his dress greens, but it's a black and white image. What I mean is he's in his dress uniform. Yes, we don't see them as green. And his arms are on the armrests, and notably the logo covers his face. And this is a bold compositional choice. You sometimes see this with book covers or movie posters. This reminds me of an early teaser poster for the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and where the logo covers the two actors, like half of their faces where their eyes are. This is not a mistake. This is on purpose, and it sort of focuses you on the uniform and the flag, and then you realize the context, which is the wheelchair. I like the idea of this cover. I like the color treatment. I do see a repeating Photoshop brush just over the stars under the pouch that's under Hawk's bars. It's on the right side. There's sort of this like Photoshop brush that's got this sort of seemingly randomized pattern, and then it's like pasted like 6 times, and a upward diagonal swoosh kind of away from his hand. And that's also happening on the bottom part of the flag. There's some dot patterns that are repeating that you're not supposed to be able to see. But it's a striking image, and it says a lot. Main cover for 35. Both these covers are penciled by Tim Seeley. The main cover for 35 is Wraith on the left in profile, just his head and the tip of his weapon, and Snake Eyes on the right, looking to the left in profile with the tip of his weapon. And there's a splatter behind them, that would be done in white paint on, black ink on the Bristol or on a separate piece of Bristol. And then here it's colored sort of a dull orange. And this is a bold idea for a cover, but I think in subtle ways, Seeley's not quite up to the drawing task of it. It gets the job done, right? And certainly this happens in the issue. These two characters fight, and it's an exciting fight. But I look at this drawing and I sort of think about the physical logic of it. It's like, well, if we saw them full body, they would be like leaning in toward each other and like craning their necks forward and like scrunching up their arms so that the tips of their weapons show a little bit in the cover, but you'd never stand like that. You'd never hold your weapon like that. I had this pet peeve. This happens with Deadpool a lot in Marvel Comics the last 20 years, and it happens a little bit with Snake Eyes in Devil's Due Comics, where the mask over his face is sort of like tight enough that whatever he's doing with his mouth, if he's like grimacing or frowning, you can see that in the contours of the mask, and I find that a little unrealistic and distracting. I think Snake Eyes is best left a blank canvas that we project onto, and if we see him with gritted teeth because the bottom half is mask is torn away in like a Rob Liefeld Dead Game cover, or if we see him like frowning because Tim Seeley draws like really frowny eyebrows on Wraith and Snake Eyes in this whole issue, even though they have masks on, or his mouth is like it's an upside down smile. Anyway, the cover's okay. You guys want to talk about any of the store exclusive or variants?
There's the cover B for 35 is Tim Seeley Sunder Raj. It's Snake Eyes sort of in the foreground with sort of Wraith coming behind him, sort of block, and Snake Eyes is blocking his blow. It's okay, not too exciting. And cover C, the second printings for both books have interior panels that have been blown up. As I said, the 34 has got that panel of Cobra Commander, half snake looming over Baroness, and cover C has got the splash page of Wraith decking Snake Eyes without the wham sound effects that was on the interiors. Yeah, okay. I mean, if you want to get a second printing out of it, it makes sense to as an economy option to use an interior page, splash page, but not necessarily the one I would seek out.
I have one more thing to say about 35. This cover reminds me of, speaking of movie posters, the movie poster for Demolition Man, the movie with Stallone and Wesley Snipes. And they're a little bit different, right? In that poster, they're not holding their weapons. They're not sort of leaning forward. They're just straight up and down. This cover also slightly reminds me, because it's the opposite of Ron Wagner's cover to Nth Man number 9. And anytime I see a comic book cover where two characters are like facing off, or sort of the opposite of facing off, like back to back, it can be like that like 80s trope of like, one person's got their arms folded and the other person's like leaning back, and they're like sort of flirty, or they're sort of teaming up, or they sort of don't like each other. And I find Ron Wagner's cover to Nth Man 9, and again, this isn't a fair comparison because it is the opposite, and there is a lot more information, but I feel like you could do a little bit more with just Wraith's head and just Snake Eyes' head, right? You can move them up a little bit, you could pull back a little bit, you could show a shoulder, you could something, right? And the Demolition Man poster is quite effective, although I'm like a little distracted because I'm certain these two guys were photographed separately, and that's like not Photoshop, but a Photoshop job to like complement together. There's also one other thing happening with this cover with Wraith and Snake Eyes, which happens a little bit in the issue, where Wraith's costume to me is white and gray, or light gray and medium gray. And Snake Eyes' costume, we think of it as black, but it's actually sort of dark gray in Devil's Due. But it's actually medium gray in Devil's Due. And they end up looking in color, in value, so similar on this cover to 35 that I think that could be clever. It's like, oh, they're mirror images of each other, or it's the really cool bad guy and the really cool good guy. That's a statement. I don't love it. And I think it ends up being like art and color that gets a little bit away from the creative team. And it's like, no, it's sort of like Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow facing off. Like Wraith has a lot of white in him. Snake Eyes has a lot of black in him. There should be a contrast.
So what happened in these issues? Jay, do you have a plot breakdown for us?
Yes, I do. The Baroness, dressed attractively in a sleeveless, black, skin-tight something, runs down a hallway in a Cobra building. She's being pursued by Cobra Commander, who first appears to Anastasia as a strange snake guy like Globulus, and then as, well, Cobra Commander with snake arms, I guess. Snake Arm Cobra Commander tells the Baroness that her search for the truth has led her right around to him. This pleases me, the Commander says. You want me to be pleased, don't you? When I am pleased, the pain is lessened. What the hell? Baroness wakes up from a nightmare, and Destro is there, in his mask. Destro says, "My precious." Baroness says, "James." Scalpel stands in the background and stares at them both like a creeper. In Washington, D.C., Hector Ramirez, along with Flint and Lady J, reveal the truth of the explosion at WNN Studios. Flint announces to the press that the Joe team has captured Cobra Commander. Meanwhile, back at the pit, Joe Colton assumes command of the team because Hawk won't answer his phone. Duke briefs Colton on the situation and says, in his opinion, announcing that Cobra Commander has been captured is one of the dumbest things he's ever seen. Jane asks why he expects retaliation since it was the Baroness herself who shot Commander. Nothing could surprise me at this point, Duke says. On Cobra Island, Destro meets with the Crimson Twins. The twins try to capture Destro, but Destro introduces them to the Wraith and the CGs lay down their arms. In Arizona, Snake Eyes, Roadblock, Clutch, and Mayday prepare to infiltrate the Colorado town of New Moon. Flint tells the team that Mirage, along with 3 green shirts, had gone in before the others and were making regular reports, until they weren't. Clutch and the others drop in subtly in an armored van by helicopter. In New Moon, one of the green shirts has been shot, appears to be near death. The Joe, Mirage, asks one of the green shirts, Stahl, if he can count on him to maintain cover fire while he tries to obtain a vehicle for him. Stahl says, "You can count on me, sir." But when the moment comes, Mirage cannot count on Stahl. Stahl leaves his position too soon and one of his teammates is killed as a result of his impatience. The Joes pick up Mirage and Stahl, but their helicopter is hit with a rocket before they can get away. The getaway van crashes to the ground. Inside the pit, the jugglers tell Colton he has 2 weeks to produce Hawk, or they'll review the G.I. Joe team. Snake Eyes and Mayday bust their way out of the twisted van, only to find themselves face to face with Scrap Iron, Major Blood, and Wraith. Mayday tells Clutch to get the van moving. Roadblock says, "What about Snake Eyes?" Mayday tells Roadblock Snake Eyes sent her back so he could fight Wraith. That was a mistake. General Abernathy, aka Hawk, is woken up by a hospital orderly in Denver, Colorado. Time to take his meds. The girl leaves and Hawk stares into the darkness. "Is there something I can do for you, Kamakura?" he asks. "Please, Hawk," Kamakura says, stepping out of the shadows. "It's Sean. When you call me by my code name, I feel like I'm supposed to kick somebody." Kamakura tells Hawk he needs to appear before the jugglers within 2 weeks to save the Joe team. In New Moon, the Joes arrive just as Wraith is getting the upper hand on Snake Eyes. Outnumbered, Wraith disappears, literally. The Joes on the ground are picked up by Joes in a helicopter, just as the Cobras set off a massive series of explosions that level the town of New Moon. When they arrive back at Joe HQ, Flint tells the others that not only was Cobra recording their every move in New Moon, but they edited the footage to make it appear as though the Joes went rogue and destroyed the town in a bloodlust. Joe Colton is pissed off and wants to take the battle to Cobra. Duke just wants Hawk to come back. At Fort Riley, Kansas, Mirage tells Stahl he doesn't have the clearance to go to the nearest Joe base, so they're leaving him there until further transportation can be arranged. Stahl asks Mirage if he will be facing any charges. Mirage says no, but if he's ever asked his opinion of Stahl, he'll tell them he is a childish, inattentive mess of a soldier, an arrogant blemish on a family of career military men, and the last person in the world he'd trust his life to. Later, on Cobra Island, as Alexander listens menacingly outside the door, Scalpel reveals to Destro that the Baroness is pregnant. The end.
Very good.
So, I have a top-down reaction. I like the plot of these 2 issues. If you were to describe to me the story beats, I would say, oh, this sounds like a fun, interesting G.I. Joe story. I don't like any of the specifics. I don't like most of the scripting choices. And you know, it's me, so I don't like some of the art and color choices. So, you know, sort of even from the beginning, like on page 4, the Baroness wakes up in a sort of a hospital setting, and she's not wearing a normal hospital gown. She's wearing one with a Cobra logo on it, but it's the like short skirt version because she's the Baroness and has to be sexy. It's like, no. Hospital gowns are like decidedly unsexy. They go down past your knees. And then on the next page, for some reason, a reporter takes the podium at a White House presidential briefing. Like, no, that doesn't happen. Reporters ask questions, but the press secretary isn't going to like yield the podium to a reporter, even if the reporter was there. Like that doesn't happen. The Joes are sort of acting, not helplessly, but sort of all the conversation around. I think the story beat of Hawk isn't here, we're in trouble. Joe Colton is here, we have to get through to Hawk. The jugglers are a problem. I like all 4 or 5 of those things, but the specifics, like none of the dialogue hits for me. The Joes sort of don't seem to know what they're doing. It seems like Hawk is this sort of super leader and they can't do anything without him. And then like the stuff with this green shirt who's working with Mirage, he's like incompetent. And then he like, there's a panel where he's seemingly holding his pistol as if he's maybe gonna shoot Mirage or something.
That's kind of what I thought.
These 2 issues don't work for me. I'm sorry.
I'll go in with the contrary view, I think. So I've been thinking about sort of the Devil's Due arc in general and how we've been, I guess, treating it. So you know, sort of prompted by my discussion with Josh, and there's a lot of love for the Devil's Due era, which I think I basically feel that there's and I enjoyed it very much at the time. But then when we get into the nuts and bolts of individual issues, I think there's a tendency to maybe see more of the flaws as you explore the detail, rather than sort of taking away an initial feeling, perhaps, of what it was like, you know, reading it for the first time, or you know. So I'm going to make a conscious effort to try and sort of see a little bit more of the positive. So I basically enjoyed these 2 issues, and I sort of was thinking about it, and I kind of feel like the book's now has kind of reached the point where it's doing its own thing, and it's feeling very different to the Marvel era, or not necessarily trying to do the same thing as the Marvel era. So you've got Hawk in a wheelchair and leaving the team. We've got new leadership, both for Joe's, but also Destro for Cobra. We've got, you know, quite a big sort of plot change there with Baroness being pregnant. We've got a cast of characters where some of the larger roles includes the likes of Claymore, Mirage, Scrap Iron, Wraith, Scalpel. You know, very different characters to the ones that were being explored in the Marvel era. And it feels to me that well, there's, you know, certainly it's not perfect. The art seems to be a lot more confident and dynamic, and at times, you know, echoing quite a modern image style of the time, which I'm not saying is a good or bad thing, but is quite different to the kind of the Marvel era of art. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be to enjoy and be excited about these 2 issues.
I enjoyed them. I thought they're pretty good. There were little things that I didn't like Tim said, and probably it's a little of both, you know, art decisions and also the occasional scripting thing. The very first sequence with Cobra Commander as the big snake thing is just weird, and he looks inconsistent. That last panel, again, I'm not. He looks like somebody grabbed his tail, you know, not like he's
that last panel of page 1. He's sort of, I don't know what that expression is meant to be, but it looks like it looks like that special edition of Star Wars,
right?
When, Han Solo steps on Jabba the Hutt's tail.
I like what's going on, I think, but just visually, it's not the best for it. I have a problem when I read things like this of trying to picture what it would look like, by like a different artist or something, and I just think this nightmare sequence could be incredible. I'm not saying Seeley's, again, we all say Seeley's good. He's just not a great storyteller. He doesn't use a lot of blacks like I tend to prefer, or this sequence would be good with. But yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed these two overall. I thought it's different. It's really different, like you said, than the Marvel run. It feels more, I guess I want to say more grown up, the way that the stories unfold.
Before we move on too far, just on that sort of dream sequence, I was looking at the summary on Yojo, which is written by Josh Eggerbein, in fact, and it describes that sequence in a way that my thought process didn't leap to that being the interpretation at the time. Maybe there's something in the script that I've
how does he describe it?
Picked up. So he says. The Baroness has a dream where Cobra Commander, who is half snake, is talking to her about pleasing him, and that happens when her pain is lessened. This is a direct effect of how the brainwave scanner controls a person. The Baroness has been subjected to it many times. Destro and Scalpel are working with the Baroness to clear the effects of the brainwave scanner, and that is causing the bad dreams.
Oh. Yeah, I didn't get that from
it's not the conclusion that I would have necessarily drawn, but a kind of, it sort of has a degree of sense, doesn't it?
Here's a line from that scene which I don't like. The Baroness says, "Please hold me, please." What? That's not the Baroness. Once again, I see writers at Devil's Due treating women as fragile and emotional in a way that men aren't. And yes, she's had a terrible dream and she's hooked up to some equipment in a hospital room that's maybe also a lab. So whether Josh Eggbean's description of this is accurate or not, there is something else going on here which isn't explained, and it doesn't have to be explained. It could be a surprise for the next issue, or maybe it's supposed to be really obvious. Maybe we're supposed to remember that 33 issues plus 7 years plus 3 issues ago, Baroness got zapped by the brainwave scanner near the end of the Marvel run. But, Baroness is such a tough cookie, and here she is like hugging Destro and not crying, but it seems like sort of in that direction. Please hold me, please. Ever since I shot Cobra Commander, he's haunted my dreams. It's like, no, where's the kick butt Baroness I know who would react differently to this?
Yeah, I like a more ruthless, cold, emotionless Baroness. That's who she needs to be.
If the argument is that because she's pregnant, she's having mood swings or something, then okay, maybe. But I also feel like that happens later in the 9 months, although I don't know.
And I think if they did that, we would be like, oh, well, of course she's got mood swings or something.
See, in my experience, it happens in advance of being pregnant and afterwards as well.
Yes.
I was just going to interject with a good point and balance for editorial balance that Richard Straw made on the back of our last episode when we're talking about issue 33 and some of the women being emotional in that. And so Richard pointed out that Lady J was in fact crying at the attack of the pit, the one that Serpentor led, when Flint very heroically sort of waded into the fray, and there's a panel of her there crying, and she's going, "Okay, tough guy, live up to your act." And also it reminded me of I was also thinking about this and women crying in the original Marvel run, and remembered the Baroness crying in the Rattler as I think it was shortly after that when they did a fly past over the site of the ruins of the pit, where she believed that Destro had died.
Okay.
So we've got some precedent of some crying ladies.
Now, see, I'll give Lady J that one though, because she just left Flint surrounded by like 8 or 10 killer robots. So she's possibly thinking
eels up inside you.
He's going to die. Eels. Well.
And I'll give the Baroness doing that flyover if she thinks that Destro has just died. Also, that's 2 times out of 200 issues, Joe plus special missions. And in Devil's Due, we've got
2 or 3 times an issue.
No, it's the
true.
stuff with the wedding ring, and with Hawk being concerned about Hawk, and Baroness here.
Don't bring up that wedding ring, you'll trigger Jenny.
I feel like this kind of thing has happened 6 or 7 times in 34 issues plus the 17 issues of Frontline. So it is happening more often, and I don't think they're as earned, or I don't think they're earned. So I don't want to say that the 2 writers at Devil's Due so far can't do this, but it's conspicuous.
How about Joe Colton's chauvinist line when they introduced Jane? Jane's a good girl to have around. You ask me, they should stay in the kitchen, but she's handy enough in a pinch. Jane says nice, okay. Joe.
I don't like that.
I didn't either.
And I don't think it's necessary.
I do like her reaction though.
If they're trying to establish that this is a sort of a man at a time from the 60s, I mean,
a real misogynist hero.
Well, see, here's the thing. Like, Joe Colton had by now shown up in Marvel 86, Marvel around 129,
several appearances,
and also Marvel, I think 152, right? And he doesn't say that kind of stuff there. So you can do that, but there isn't groundwork laid for it. There's a I want to talk about a story thing.
I've got a new favorite line of dialogue for this issue.
I want to talk about an art thing that I don't love, but a story thing that I think works really well. A third of the way into issue 34, Destro, back on Cobra Island, is talking with Tomax and Xamot, and they have this back and forth about sort of who should be in charge and how Cobra is working or isn't working with all of these all the volatility recently. And I thought that was both a thoughtful sort of story recap for readers who are new or have forgotten, but also like actually a kind of conversation that would happen. And Destro, the way that he ends it, I think is great, where after Wraith is revealed, he says, you're going to fall in line. And speaking of which, you're going to spend a few hours in the stockade thinking things over, which I think is actually great. I think maybe the Marvel Hama Destro would never go that far, but I think, a small punishment to sort of further force their hand. Okay, so I think that's great. I think the whole scene, I think the reveal of Wraith is really fun. Okay.
That sequence sort of stuck for me. I liked it. And what I found interesting about it was the way that sort of basically Tomax and Xamot have got, they're attempting an armed coup to take over Cobra, aren't they, away from him. And he sort of just kind of swats it away sort of fairly nonchalantly and says, stop being silly. And I just like that. I like as well the next thing that he said after the dialogue that you quoted. He says,
I simply don't have time for any more nonsense.
It's like, stop it with your silliness. We've got important things to be focusing on here.
Okay, so I like the plot, and for this scene, these 4 pages, I really like the script. There are 3 things in the art that don't work for me. One, the bottom of page 10, Seeley does this thing where he draws a panel and then he copies it and pastes it and changes one thing. And artists have been doing this for a long time in comics, right? Before the 90s, maybe before the late 90s with Photoshop and scanners, it was with a photocopier, with a Xerox machine. And certainly artists who draw digitally nowadays do it a lot because it's so easy, and comics have gotten really conversational, and so you sort of have a character just like copied and pasted a few times. Okay, so Tomax and Xamot, Xamot says, please accept our apologies, Destro. And Tomax says, but we simply have no belief left in our hearts. We do wish things could be different, but this is truly the only way. And in the second panel, there are now 2 Crimson Guardsmen standing there, pointing their guns at Destro. Okay, I have 2 problems with this visually. One, considering it's an armed coup, although a gentlemanly coup, there is no tension in that second panel. The 2 Crimson Guardsmen Yes, they're standing. They're not like sleeping in the fetal position, aiming their weapons at Destro. They're standing there, but they sort of blinked in from nowhere, and that's always a weird thing for me. I always need a little bit of like the end of the movement or body language that shows that they have just walked into the shot, as opposed to like standing there like they blinked in or teleported in. So in terms of like actual pose and composition, it doesn't work for me. And then in terms of like tension, sort of like how everyone is standing and reacting, and that's actually a big moment, but it doesn't get a lot of real estate. But that's okay. There is no tension in this panel, which is a disappointment for me. But I'm okay with that because Jerwa and Seeley are saving space for the page turn, which is this full splashed reveal. So before I talk about that, I just want to make a quick comparison. This morning, I read this issue of G.I. Joe in preparation for this episode. This morning, I also read a new comic that came out last week at comic book stores everywhere. And this is a random bit of synchronicity. This just happened to be the DC Comics Milestone Blood Syndicate issue 2. And there are 2 times in this comic where the artist is Crisscross, and he draws a character who's doing something, and then he draws like the exact same panel a second time. And unlike Seeley, he doesn't copy and paste and then add a thing. He slightly changes what the guy is doing from the first panel to the second panel. And he does it both times. And it's like small changes in his hand is holding something, and his face is like reacting to something. And it is a tool in the toolkit of the artist to draw body language and facial expressions and acting. And not just in this Tim Seeley example here in Devil's Due Joe, but in every comic ever where I've read that an artist copies and pastes and like doesn't change things. That to me makes it seem like if it's a movie, like someone pressed pause, or like in the scene, someone has quietly fired a freeze ray. Because like, yes, technically, gentlemen, if the 3 of us are standing in front of each other talking, someone's talking and they might be moving their arms, and the other 2 of us like aren't moving at all, right? We're breathing, our hearts are beating. But in this moment from the sort of A panel to the B panel, like Tomex and Zaymot, like one of them doesn't cross his arms, one of them doesn't like put his hand out with his palm up in this like presentational body language to present the Crimson Guard. Destro doesn't react at all. And so again, it's this effect of like, I'm watching a movie and it like someone pressed pause. Okay, so then you turn the page, and I do like this splash, right? Wraith comes out of nowhere because he's got this invisibility cloaking technology, and Destro says,
I was gonna say, and it gives you the splash that you said you wanted in the backup story that you never got.
Oh yeah. Yes, fair. Because the backup story in the 3 previous issues was so compressed. Okay, and Destro says, I disagree, and he's smiling, and his arms are behind his torso, and he's calm and in control. Okay, so that's an exciting splash page. It's a sexy drawing of Wraith. It's like it's a splash page that feels like a cover. It grabs your attention. He's pointing his weapons. He's stealthing. And in the foreground, you see hands reacting for both Tomex and Zaymot. Great. Okay, then what happens in the next panel? The same thing.
Yeah.
So in the splash page, Wraith appears and is pointing his weapons. And then in the next panel, Wraith is standing there and pointing his weapon. And so Destro continues and he says, say hello to Wraith. And I'm disappointed that half of the fourth page of this scene is now a half-page splash of Wraith that is accomplishing the same thing as the full splash of Wraith. And what I really want in that final page is like more acting from Tomax and Zaymot. Like maybe that's the panel where now he raises his weapon and they both put their hands up and take a half step back and react. And so, between scripting, dividing up dialogue and acting into panels, and then actually drawing it, I like the plot of this scene. I like the script of this scene. I don't like the storytelling of this scene.
Yeah, I think a lot of the best artists and the ones who take it very seriously, they'll do an exercise of perhaps sketching out an entire 20-page story on a single piece of paper, even like, yes, very sort of small thumbnails of what is happening to kind of look at the symmetry of the overall issue, maybe sort of start thinking about color palettes, things like that. And perhaps, something like this, would have been caught up by an exercise like that, because as a single page, both of these pages are fine. They look nice. It's an interesting image of Wraith. It's only when you really lay them next to each other that it loses the impact that it would have otherwise had of the sum of the two pages is kind of not as big as the value of each of those individually.
I wonder who did the layouts, whether that was something that Brandon included in his script, or whether he said one long vertical panel, 4 smaller panels make up the left side of the page, or something like that.
I think that's Seeley.
You think?
Yeah. I think that's it. We could go back and listen to our 2 episodes with Jerwa.
I don't know if we talked about it or not.
I don't get the impression that he's calling the shots that specifically.
Yeah, probably not.
I actually asked Brandon about this, and this is what he had to say. Let me see what accent I'll do. I usually give a fair amount of detail and direction. I don't think so much in terms of relative panel size, sometimes if it was a big moment, but I would definitely speak to the drama and significance of a beat, which would often result in the artist going big. I'm not entirely sure what that accent was, but hopefully you get the gist of the sentiment.
Now, I have been hard on Seeley in previous episodes and this episode, but when you turn the page, I will point out, right, we cut to Arizona and this team of Joes is standing in front of the van. To his credit, right, in previous issues, all of these panels might have been straight on, flat, 1-point perspective drawings. And what we get in the big second panel is, it's 1-point perspective, but the quote camera is tilted. And then in the third panel, we get an over-the-shoulder shot past Flint, and we can see the grid in perspective of the ceiling. We're looking a tiny bit up because Roadblock is taller than Flint. In the next panel, we get another up angle. I mean, technically it's 3-point perspective if we're looking up, but it's sort of cheating here as 2-point perspective. We see the grid of the ceiling. And then in the final panel, we get this downward 2 or technically 3-point perspective of the Joes. To use a term that Larry Hama has used, and I think I've used in a previous episode, this final panel here is like, it's not quite Joe Kubert clothesline pins because they're much bigger, but it's almost that. So the sort of layout, the quote camera angles of this page is showing more pep, and I appreciate that. And if that's Seeley getting better, great.
Yeah, it was something that I noticed looking at these 2 issues as well, is that I think Seeley appears to be slightly more confident and trying to do more interesting things with sort of the shots, the angle of the composition, the use of perspective and so on. That sometimes it isn't entirely successful, but it feels like he's trying to go for more variety of different kind of shots, like you say, less of the 1 point, straight on.
All right, so in some ways, Seeley's getting better, but then the next page, where the van drives up the ramp, and then it gets latched onto something, I don't know what. There's dust being kicked up, and there's a sound effect for whump, 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 whump. And then in the next panel, where we see Mayday, Roadblock, and Clutch, I see 2 cables. And then in the next panel, at the end of this page, I see a helicopter with a tiny, tiny van attached to the bottom of it. That's quite hard to see because of the way that it's colored. So in this scene, Seeley doesn't visually establish how the van is being connected to the helicopter, or sort of how clearly enough. And then when they finally get to the city to do their rescue mission, when Roadblock and Snake Eyes open up the back of the van. This is in the third to last page of this issue. And they're firing out the back of the van. And then 2 panels later, they pull in Mirage and his green shirt. And then there's an explosion over them. And then the van lands. It seems like Seeley is trying to avoid drawing the helicopter. And this comes back to a comment I've made on this kind of storytelling problem, where I feel like a lot of artists who are still improving put the camera too close. Everything is a close-up or a medium shot. And what this really needs here is a much clearer shot of the whole helicopter with the whole van. And so we can see how the van is like stuck under the bottom of the helicopter. Like if you're in the driver's seat of the van, I don't think you can see anything because part of the copter is right in front of the windshield. And then, so if you're in the driver's seat or the passenger seat of the van, you have to look sideways out. And then I don't have a good sense at all in this scene of how low the van gets to the ground. And how Mirage and his green shirt, is there a ladder? Do they jump? Do they climb up? Does the van swoop down and just for a moment it's low enough that they can get pulled in? But then there's a line of dialogue, right? Where it's from, I guess, the pilot, right? 15 feet high and raw. And then there's an explosion. And then the van lands with all this debris not landing on the van. So in terms of writing and visual storytelling here, confusing and not satisfying.
That's what I thought. I was like, that helicopter is just going to come down right on top of them. I mean, there's no way that it wouldn't, unless like when they hit the ground, they hauled ass, which they could because they got clutch driving. But come on. Yeah, as soon as that went up, I was like, they're all dead. But speaking of dead, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But like all those guys, whoever was in the helicopter, they're just dead now. We assume. I'm not sure who was in that helicopter.
It was the character called Pilot.
Is that 2 green shirt pilots? Is that lift ticket and a green shirt? Is that 2 generic pilots who aren't Joes? That feels like a little underwritten. And in the way that in previous issues from Devils do, A, Joes have been killed, and B, green shirts have been killed, and some of them have some emotional resonance. Someone's upset. We take a moment to remember them. But early on, it felt cheap.
Yep.
This feels cheap.
There's that sequence in the original Marvel run where Zartan is disguising himself as Hawk, and he talks to Wild Bill, and he says, at ease, trooper, or something like that. And it's kind of a tell that something's off because Hawk would never call someone trooper, that, he'd always know their name. So Clutch just calling the pilot, this is Clutch. We're still hitched, yeah, as you say.
You might as well have said red shirt instead of green shirt.
Exactly, yeah.
But I think that what this mission is, perhaps Mirage and his team here is the same kind of mission that Beachhead was on with the green shirts in that frontline thing. Remember where there was like Beachhead and like 4 or 5 green shirts? And this is like Mirage and 3 or 4 green shirts.
Yeah, or 1 green shirt by the end of the mission.
I thought maybe that was the same kind of thing, and it went bad, and now the real Joes have to go in and, save everybody's ass.
I'm having a hard time with the
interaction between Stahl and Mirage.
I'm having a hard time with all 3 green shirts in this story. The Joes are the best of the best. And if, it's like the best people from the Green Berets and the Delta Force, the Navy SEALs. So like not just the best of the best, the best of the best of the best. And then you have 100 men and women, right, on the Joe team, or like 72 Joes. And there's logic to having a program where you bring in new Joes. And also it's good story. It happens in issue, is it 72 of the Marvel run with the Viper and Repeater on the cover, where 3 Joes are becoming Joes. because, then maybe one of these, who's the lady sniper who I always give a hard time from the 10 issues ago?
Mayday?
Oh, is that her? No, she was a green shirt.
Yeah.
Wait, did she?
Paige Adams.
She got promoted.
Okay, sorry.
Oh my
God. Sorry, I'm reading these issues and not keeping them in my memory as much as I should before I read the next issues.
She used to be blonde as well. Now she's brunette.
Okay, right. Thank you. That's part of it. Thank you. So, that's cool that this character, evolved over some appearances and now is a fully fledged Joe and has a costume and a code name. Great. But okay, so here's a team with the best of the best of the best, and they have this trainee program, and one or two of them aren't very good at what they do, and one of them is sort of insubordinate or psychologically rocky, damaged. Yeah, and I, one of the things that I think about with all G.I. Joe comics is that it can be hard to make the characters interesting because you might not have a lot of extremes in behavior. To be that good, you probably have to be very smart, very physically talented, and calm under pressure. So if you have 100 people who are calm under pressure, it's hard to write a story where someone is freaking out or is really passionate about football or wine or this weapon, because it reminds me of this film First Man that came out a couple years ago where Ryan Gosling plays Neil Armstrong, right? First Man on the Moon. And Gosling turns in a great performance, but that's not going to win an Oscar because astronauts are all calm under pressure. They're not passionate people who raise their voices because they're doing impossible things. And they're also incredibly smart and educated and physically fit. And so Gosling's performance in that movie is understated, right? And understated performances don't win lead Oscars. And so on the one hand, I see maybe the frustration or the possibility that a writer like Jerwa, it's I'm going to have one of the Joes flip out, or I'm going to have one of the Joes not ready for it. And it can be one of the trainees, but it still doesn't work for me. It's no, this kid would have been filtered out before this.
Yeah, that's a problem that I had with that issue before. In my opinion, you would never have a Joe that was scared under fire like that, or incompetent or just sloppy. I'm totally with you, Tim. I think that they all should be the top of their game. They're the best of the best. They're not going to be, doing the stuff that these green shirts have done throughout the entire Devil's Due series.
The idea of the green shirts isn't that they're completely green and not inexperienced or untalented or anything. It's meant to be that you're taking your regular military, you're taking, you're filtering, identifying some of the very best of those and filtering them into this talent program essentially, and then from there, the very best of those will then graduate into the Joe team. And there's this line from Flint, who's talking about Mirage's team, and he says, he set up this operation with a 3-man green shirt unit in tow. Granted, we have a good training program, but at the end of the day, they're called green shirts for a reason. Mm-hmm. But it's it's not like they're summer interns sort of doing it, between terms at school. These are meant to be sort of seasoned military people who've got experience and have been identified as being amongst the best of the regular military and sort of filter into the G.I. Joe screening program.
If I have a problem with how the green shirts behave in future issues, I will refer to them as the G.I. Joe summer intern.
One of the things that sort of stood out about this Stall the Bad Guy green shirt storyline, and I think we all noticed it, was that panel where he's sort of getting annoyed with Mirage, and they've got a panel of him squeezing the trigger on a pistol. Are you kind of on the precipice of about to shoot Mirage, or commanding officer, because the mission is just too difficult for you, essentially? Well, I guess too pressurized.
Also, I have something else that I want to talk about with that scene. So this is issue 35. This is page 11.
If that's Mirage or what's his name, Stahl holding that gun, it should be pointed the other direction. That's what makes it confusing.
Yes. Okay, so first panel, the Jovan is driving left to right. Second panel, Mirage is on the left. Stahl's on the right. Next panel, Mirage is on the left. Stahl's on the right. Next panel, Tim Seeley has broken the 180-degree rule, and there is now a pistol in close-up with a hand sort of shaking it, starting to pull the trigger, and it is facing to the right. And so the visual logic is that that hand is Mirage's because it's facing the right. Mm-hmm. And then the next panel, Seeley sort of unbreaks the 180-degree rule, which another way of phrasing that could be breaks it again, and puts Mirage back on the left and Stahl back on the right. But then we do see who's holding that pistol, and it is Stahl. So we do get some explanation, some closure in that panel. And then in the final panel, the van continues to drive to the right. And comics are not movies. Movies are not comics, even though we use some of the same terms. Like, these aren't camera angles, these aren't shots, these are panels, and these are all drawn. But I'm a firm believer that comic books should follow at least this one rule from cinema, the 180-degree rule, where you draw a line that is perpendicular to the picture plane, to the camera lens, and you can't move your camera over it. You can swing it anywhere, all the way up to it on the right, all the way up to it on the left in a half circle. And if you want to move your camera to the other side of the 180-degree line, you have to cut to something neutral, like a waiter somewhere else in another scene, or you have to cut on the 180-degree line, something straight on before, which is in effect creating a new 180-degree line. I made a handout about this for my students, and I talk about it when I show movie clips at the end of my drawing semester. And even if you don't know that term, that concept from film, I think you read the comic and that panel is like a little confusing, and maybe you don't know why.
Yep, it totally is.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have fixed it too. Just flip that panel.
Yeah, or I mean, this comic is being colored in Photoshop. So ask the colorist, like, hey, can you not just color this panel? Can you? I think the technical term for flipping left right or right left is flop. Can you flop this panel?
But we were talking about the stall, the green shirt.
Yeah, okay.
Let's just finish up on that. So did you pick up on where this storyline is going?
More or less.
No.
So his surname is Stahl. I don't know if it's said anywhere, but his first name is Thomas Stahl. He comes from a long line of stalls in the military, handy for reaching shelves that are high up.
And the other Stahl that we've seen is
Barrel Roll, who is Dwight Stahl, the same name as the designer, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, sorry, hold my hand. Is the green shirt Stahl going to become an actual Joe with a code name? That is a toy?
So Thomas Stahl is the file name for Blackout.
Okay, right.
The Cobra brother of Dwight Stahl, Barrel Roll. So we're getting some foreshadowing of the kind of the origin stories of why this Stahl brother has sort of started off in the military and has had a falling out with the Joes and has turned. So I think this negative experience is crucial in souring him.
I'm anxious to see what the heel turn is. Does that happen at the end of this story? It's like, what's he going to do? Is he going to kill somebody? Is he going to kill a Joe or something? I'm anxious to see what's going to happen. I
was going to say, it's at the end of the story in terms of just story terms. He sort of completed this mission. It's been a train wreck. But Mirage sort of says that he's not going to kind of proactively throw him under a bus. He's going to, if he gets asked about the success of the mission, then he'll give his opinions. But he's sort of very blunt with Thomas Stahl. He says that his opinion is that he's a childish, inattentive mess of a soldier, an arrogant blemish on a family of career military men, and the last person in the world I trust my life to. Good luck.
I want to jump back to something that we haven't said yet before that's probably worth saying. Mm-hmm. In the previous backup stories, Wraith breaks out of prison Scrap Iron and Major Blood. And after Wraith does this reveal with Destro to stop Tomax and Xamot's hostile takeover, Scrap Iron and Major Blood show up with Wraith to fight the Joes after the van has been dropped from the exploding helicopter. And I think everyone should know out there in G.I. Joe land that Scrap Iron was the third G.I. Joe figure I ever bought. And he's a favorite of mine. And even though the sculpt on the head's a little too big, but he comes with an awesome pistol and an awesome accessory in the form of his missile launcher with a remote control.
Mm-hmm.
And did I mention his color scheme? And there's such great sculpting on his costume, and the fact that he and Airborne share much of that mold. Isn't that right?
Do they? Really?
The mold?
Am I making that up? Doesn't he have the same? Don't they have the same legs?
Oh,
Ooh.
maybe. I don't know.
They've both got those sort of knee pads.
Yeah.
They're the same legs, I think. Okay.
So, and Scrap Iron barely shows up in the animated series and barely shows up in the Marvel series. He's so cool. And he's got an amazing line at the end of his file card that actually does get a little bit picked up on here, finally, years later in the Devil's Due run. And, Major Blood's such a cool badass. So I'm glad to see them back in the story. And it makes sense that they show up here after, Wraith shows up to do this fight. The final panel of issue 34 is a return to the sort of not dramatic straight on shot that I give Seeley a hard time for, where Scrap Iron and Wraith and Blood are just standing there. I mean, I guess Blood is sort of walking toward us, but that panel feels like everyone wanted it to be a full page splash. It's like a very sexy page that'll sell for a lot of money because it's like a cover. And then it teases next Wraith versus Snake Eyes. So the beginning of 35 has this big fight between Wraith and Snake Eyes. And so I wanted to hand this back to you guys. A, what do you think about Scrap Iron and Blood in this story? B, what do you think about the Snake Eyes Wraith fight?
I always like seeing Scrap Iron and Major Blood. Definitely. I'm with you. Scrap Iron was one of my favorites. And I loved, you mentioned his color scheme too. I loved that the earlier Cobras, like the first 3 or 4 years, Cobra had definitely a color scheme that most of their guys, went with, and that made them all look really good together. Scrap Iron's awesome. Blood was awesome. The fight between Snake Eyes and Wraith is a lot like the fight with Snake Eyes and the other ninja in issue 27. It's just, I can't understand the choreography. There's a 2-page spread, and I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know whether Wraith smashed Snake Eyes' visor in the top panel, and that's what Snake Eyes is reacting to, or maybe he hit Snake Eyes with same kind of move that Daniel hit Johnny with in Cobra Kai, where it paralyzed his arm or something. I don't know what's going on, because it looks like Snake Eyes is kind of stuck there, and I'm like, what, did he just do some kind of move or so? I have no idea what's going on with that 2-page spread.
Yeah, there's 2 panels which are a big close-up of Snake Eyes' face, and it's not entirely clear what that's all about, particularly one in the top right, where it's like, scratch.
Yeah, it looks like he's getting hit, but we should see Wraith's arm in that panel, or his foot or something.
I'm okay for that being a reaction shot without Wraith's arm or foot, but it's a little confusing because in the previous panel, it looks like Wraith is going to bring his fists down and not do a right cross cut.
Yeah,
from his right hand.
That's right. Yeah.
So a couple pages later, Wraith throws Snake Eyes through a window, and then
maybe.
Yeah, it's a little unclear. It looks like Snake Eyes is being thrown through a window, and in this first panel, we are inside the building, and Snake Eyes is crashing into the room where we are. Crash! And then in the next panel, I think the idea here is that Snake Eyes has landed, recovered, and is now leaping back out of the window.
Yeah.
But because of the similarity of the panels in composition and size, it sort of looks like rather than happening 6 seconds later, it happens half of a second later, and that Snake Eyes somehow like stops his reverse momentum and grabs the top of the window frame and like throws himself back out, or like turns in space and is now like kicking into the room from the outside. And then there's this close-up of Wraith's hand grabbing Snake Eyes' ankle, and Snake Eyes' ankle is colored very reflective, and it's looking kind of like Wraith's ankle, not like Snake Eyes' ankle. And I feel like this is a good place to remind everyone, like, okay, Snake Eyes doesn't have to be in pure black. That can be hard to draw, or like hard to color sort of in relation to everything. But his dark gray should be quite different from Wraith's medium gray, or Wraith's like gray with the cool texture on it, or all of the gear on Snake Eyes, all the belts and stuff has a lot of blue in it, which I feel like refers slightly to one of the recolored action figures that came out around this time. Okay, so then Wraith. So I think the idea here is that Wraith grabs Snake Eyes mid-air and interrupts Snake Eyes flinging himself out through the window and like slams him down on the ground before Snake Eyes can complete the motion of like flinging himself out the window. But the panel of Wraith on the ground slamming Snake Eyes into the ground, just using Snake Eyes' leg as a like an axis, like Wraith's pose, I don't understand why he's lying on the ground. And these first four panels are not good fight choreography. I'm sorry.
No.
Jay was saying earlier that he wanted to see, he was looking forward to seeing a heel turn. And we had got one here. He's grabbed him and turned him. So
okay, so turn.
Literally.
All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Did you say turn back or turn forward?
11, 12. 13. Okay, turn the page.
Around.
All right, turn
Every
the page.
now and then I'm grabbing Snake Eyes and chucking to the ground.
Wow. Turn around. When I look for Wraith, he has disappeared again, and I can't see him. Roadblocks hitting him on the head. Turn. All right, so page 14. And
See, the rhyme was found, can't be found.
Roadblock's going to pound him on the head. Okay, so Roadblock, first panel of page 14, Roadblock slams the butt of his big machine gun down on Wraith's head. Okay, I have several problems with this. One, the inking on Roadblock's face is this kind of inking you do when you want to show a character is evil or is sort of descending from goodness into evil, because you black out sort of the front of their face, so you sort of accentuate that it's like a skull under all that skin, or you like just leave the eyes and the teeth, and it's a little cartoonish and a little overdone here. And I think it's like making Roadblock seem like a bad guy and not like a hero who's fighting for his life. Okay, so I was just thinking the same thing, clunk. All right, so see, I read about you. Wraith, is it? All right, so Roadblock is upset because Wraith injured some Joes and got some Cobras out. And so Roadblock slams down the butt of his machine gun a second time on Wraith. I have two problems with this. One, I feel like that's going to ruin his gun, his machine gun, right? And it is much more powerful to hold an M60 and shoot the guy rather than like flip it backwards and use it like a baseball bat or like a tire iron.
If you've got a gun, don't use it as a baseball bat.
This is the kind of writing that you do when you want the scene to be like cool. They're like, yeah, take that. Jerk. It's like, no, that's actually the wrong story beat here. Like, just shoot the guy. Yep. And then also, if Roadblock can clearly see this guy is wearing like armor, and he just told us, I read about you. So wait, Roadblock, do you think that the butt of your rifle is gonna do anything to this? Like, all of you are wearing helmets. Like, every Cobra wears a helmet. And this guy's wearing like crazy stealth technology. Now, you could say, well, Tim, it's like really expensive, fragile technology. And if like one little like electric line or servo gets cut, then his, fancy equipment doesn't work. Like, okay, maybe. So in the third panel, Clutch is like starting to see this like escalate, and Roadblock's getting upset. And he says, beat up a couple of my friends too, and I don't like that, Krang. And then I'm sorry, I hate this panel. Clutch says, no more, man. You got him. And like, we've seen this in movies and TV shows and comics where the hero like starts to lose their sense of self and it's escalating. You know, it's like they're punching the bad guy and punching the bad guy and it's like, Leonardo, stop. It's not the Shredder. It's just a foot soldier, right? Like, it's the Shredder you're angry at, right? Or like Batman, no, like you can't kill the Joker. You're beating him to death. Like, okay, we've seen this before. They're at war. This is a terrorist. Like, no, shoot him. Shoot him and, yes, hit the back of his armored helmet 7 more times. Like, no, Clutch, don't interrupt this. I'm not concerned that Roadblock is losing himself in his anger. Like, let him beat this guy up.
He's totally in the wrong because the next panel, he's not down and out.
He gets up and runs away.
Trips Roadblock out over and gets away. You know, he should have kept on whacking him.
He doesn't just get away. He walks by Clutch.
Yeah, and they just kind of walk by each other.
Whoa.
Don't you even think, whoa, another time, friends. Also, no, Wraith is such a... And then I have another problem with this scene. Like, Wraith, this is not the time for Wraith to flee. Wraith is fleeing because the issue is over, right? It's like when I watch episodes of G.I. Joe, which I think is a well-written show, oftentimes Cobra Commander calls for retreat at the end of the episode because the tide has actually turned. And as a comparison, I've been watching some episodes of Mask. And it's a fun comparison because it's like G.I. Joe, but it's not. And I don't think it's written as well, but it's really fun. And I just watched 2 episodes where Miles Mayhem, the leader of Venom, the bad guys in Mask, at the end of the episode, he calls a retreat, not because the tide has turned, but because we're at minute 20 and the show's over. And it's like, no, the rules are the bad guys have to like get away. And so I feel like Wraith runs away here because the scene is over and, oh, you know what? Does he know that Cobra's going to blow up at the town? All right, maybe that's it.
Maybe. But
still.
Oh, I had one thing that I didn't like about this page that you've not mentioned, Tim, which is that Wraith has just established himself as being the better hand-to-hand in combat fighter than Snake Eyes, who is the baddest of the bad of G.I. Joe, and I don't know if him bettering Snake Eyes is entirely deserved because up to this point he's established that he's a cool sneaky guy who's got a cool suit rather than necessarily a master hand-to-hand combat specialist. But anyway, that aside, he beats Snake Eyes, but then it's Roadblock that gets the better of him in hand-to-hand combat or gun butt to head combat.
I think possibly Roadblock might have thought that Wraith's suit was armor, or was like would be able to withstand the blast from the M60, and that's why he hit him with it, the way that he did, because he said he read about him. So maybe he thought my gun's not going to do any good if I shoot him, but I can crack him with it.
I'm reminded that the word hate is strong. My stepmom discouraged me from using that word in high school. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Panel 4. I previously said that I hated that panel, and I want to take that back because I can slightly no-prize it. If the idea here is to show Roadblock losing it, that third panel, which has Krang as a sound effect, if you copied and pasted that 3 more times, Krang, 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 Clang, right? Like, it's like, no, this, then it is escalating. And I still don't think the scene quite works, but
especially
then
not
I can
with
see
Wraith
Clutch
just pops up and runs away.
Yeah.
Wink.
On the next page, some hisses show up, and I don't think there certainly doesn't need to be a splash page where we see like hisses for the first time in this scene, in this issue, in this story. But the way that the hisses are introduced in the middle 2 panels of the next page, it's like, well, we just see a little bit of their fronts. Well, we just see the little bit of the front of one of them. Well, we just see the gun turret of one of them with scrap iron in them. And I feel like let's say that they weren't hisses. Let's say that they were like incinerators, like the Cobra, they're not fire vipers or pyro vipers, but the Cobra incinerators, right? Let's say you had 2 Cobra incinerators or Cobra heat vipers come in, and you only showed like a little bit of their like knees and feet coming in that first panel because they're looking down. And then you only showed the like tip of their like missile launcher or like flamethrower in that second panel, right? It's like, are you avoiding showing these characters in finger quotes here because it's either a specific tank or a specific costume? Like, I know what a hiss looks like. If you show me a little bit of it, I know what the rest of it looks like. And if you show me a little bit of it, I do know what it is. Oh, that's a hiss. And it's a hard comic to draw, and Jerwa's putting in a lot. But I do think the layout that introduces this very specific favorite for a lot of people vehicle in this scene needs to be given some oomph. It needs to be presented a little more.
I think they can just about get away with it because it is a hiss and that is so iconic. So we know exactly what it is from just a little bit of the front or a little bit of the gun turret, and then a little bit more on the next page. We sort of see the whole thing. But
how about this?
If it was a different vehicle, I think that would have been less successful.
All right, how about this? There's the second panel of Mirage bringing Snake Eyes over his shoulder out of the building, and Mayday says, "If we hurry, we can slip out with no more trouble." And then they get to the van, and someone says, "You were saying, fine, first round's on me." You don't have to do this, but you could add a little like, "Oh no, hisses!" It's like, "Rats, 2 hisses," or
yeah, something.
Just to present
a little cue. Excuse me, a little cue that the characters also see those hiss tanks coming up behind them.
Yeah, you were saying is supposed to do that. It's a little indirect, and I think if you were saying was if the camera was
focused on the hiss tanks,
if it was 5 feet off the ground and looking right past whichever Joe is getting into the driver's seat of that van, looking over the shoulder down the street at the 2 hisses, kind of like how we see Mayday in the previous panel, but if instead of a building behind her, there was a hiss and she's getting into a van, then you were saying would connect more with the art. And I do appreciate that Seeley pulls the camera back and shows the whole alley so we can see the distance with the 2 hisses and the van. But it's present the hisses a little bit more. That's what I'm asking for.
So let's get to the big finale here. My question is, did Mayday get blown up?
I think that's an unspoken cliffhanger.
I don't think it's even a cliffhanger. I think it's just a gap in the storytelling. So she's running towards the helicopter. Mayday's almost there, and then move it. I think, and then the rest of the story. Obviously, they don't mention the fact that Mayday's dead or anything. I think it's just
or decidedly alive.
Yeah. Or I think it's just left unspoken that she made it to the helicopter before the explosion.
See, now what they should have had in that last panel is her hanging onto a ladder rope, being trailed away.
Yeah.
From that helicopter. That would have been badass.
Or when we cut back to the pit at 6 a.m. and Duke is saying New Moon, Colorado is gone. This is after the page turn of all the big explosions. She can be there like with a bandage on her forehead, or they can say, like the team made it back in one piece.
Yeah.
Except for the rain shirts or whatever.
Flint should have said, "We didn't lose anyone important." I liked it. I liked that ending. I loved that. I was like, you turn the page, the explosion you see under the helicopter on page 19, and then you turn the page and it's like, holy shit, they just like blew up like 2 city blocks. And then when you get back to the pit, like, I think that's Duke is saying, everything is gone. And it's like, wow, that's a serious escalation of the kind of thing Cobra's done.
I think that the big page with the 2/3 splash of the whole town getting blown up, that should fall on a left page. That should be a page turn reveal. I think turning the page from that to 4 Joes standing around a table.
Oh yeah, is that the way it is?
Is less interesting. And that could be on a right side of the book.
Yep.
All right, so I want to get back to this comment I had at the beginning of the show where Colton has been brought in and he's trying to help. And I think the jugglers are overused in the Devil's Due run.
Yeah.
And there's this, I think they show up twice in the original Marvel run. And I feel like they're explained just enough. And okay, in the 80s G.I. Joe cartoon, the G.I. Joe team is sometimes like a stand-in for the entire American military.
Yeah.
Which is like silly and unrealistic. And in the Devil's Due comic, I feel like the jugglers become this stand-in for like all of the government and military bureaucracy. I don't mean bureaucracy in a bad way. I mean like management. Anyone who would like give the Joes funding or give them a hard time. And I think the name is silly the more you use it. And I think when they like refer to them specifically, like, you're the jugglers. It's like, no, I don't think they call themselves that. You know, like I understand that in government, committees get names. Like right now in like 2021 and 2022, there are a couple Republicans and Democrats in Congress who are trying to work together, and they call themselves the Problem Solvers Caucus, right? Like there are different little like subgroupings like that without being like specific committees. And so, yes, you might have like 6 or 7 generals at DOD who like gave themselves a little name. But sort of Duke and Claymore and Flint and everyone with Joe Colton and without, it seems like I appreciate that Jerwa is trying to show the team is sort of listing without Hawk, and that Hawk's making it worse by not answering the phone, which is a weird note, and like coming in and like saying anything. It's like, no, he just got shot and he's got PTSD, and we're not even using that term. And I feel like rather than him sulking by himself, anyway, but the idea that the Joes are having a hard time without Hawk's making it worse by not saying anything, factions are trying to hurt the team, and then like Colton comes in to do some good, and even with him, the leadership and the Joes like need to figure it out. Like I like that they need to figure it out, but I don't like how they're sort of like, what do we do?
Yeah, again, it goes back to the Joes being portrayed as not competent, you know. And these are the actual Joes, not just the green shirts.
Yeah, it treats Hawk a little bit like he's like a superhero. Yeah. It's like, well, but Hawk does everything for the team. It's like he's the guy, and there's 1 or 2 bits of dialogue which sort of leans in that direction, and it's like, no, he's a general, yes, and he's great, but it's like there's always been leadership in Joe without him. And when did Flag die? 16 or 17? And then in the Rod Wiggum run, in the, I don't know, the 30s or 40s, Hawk gets promoted, and I forget who it is, but someone's in the hospital, and he like gives Hawk his star or his stars, right? It's like, no, the Joes aren't like left out to dry here. It's like Duke's like, what do we do? Claymore's like, I don't know, what do we do? And Colton's like, I don't know, I think we gotta do something. It's like, no, there's a system in place. Like, I feel like there's a scene missing where earlier in this issue or before this story arc, someone or the jugglers, like, wait, the Joes went public here, right? But I feel like there's a scene where some faction in government or the military has given the Joes like a one more strike and you're out ultimatum.
Yeah, it seems like this empty thread of, oh, they're going to review the team. And I was like doing the plot breakdown, and I'm like, okay, they're going to review the team. That's terrible. I'm like, that's not a huge threat. You know, it's like, yeah, they could take their funding away, but it's not a threat. Like in the same way that Cobra is a threat or something, you know? It's like, yeah, I think that there's too much, way too much of the juggler stuff going on. It's like every issue.
If Jerwa is setting up something like with Green Shirt Stall becoming, is it Blackout? If Jerwa is doing like an escalation where in a couple issues the Joes have a review, and then in a couple issues they get like shrunk down, and then in a couple issues they're going to get defunded, that would be cool if he's setting up something long term. But I don't know that I have the patience for the sort of slow version of that when the stakes at the beginning are low, but also at the same time sort of artificially inflated. Like that's what doesn't work for me.
Okay, should we move on to the final cliffhanger, shocker reveal? Baroness is pregnant.
I have a quick question. Yes. Mark, you read these comics originally when they came out, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember how you reacted then with this?
I don't know. I know I enjoyed this era at this point. I don't know that necessarily that reveal made a massive impact to me. I sort of imagine I probably felt much as I do now, which is, that's an interesting turn. See how that pans out.
I just want to see, is she going to get a maternity leather corset armor made? You know, like she wears?
Yeah.
that'd be a variant figure, pregnant Baroness figure.
I feel like if reading comic books have taught me anything, right? Like Spider-Man 75 from 1990, what was it? 7, part 4 of Revelations, the end of the Clone Saga, or any, or was it like X Factor 68 when baby Nathan goes to the future at Marvel in like 1991. I feel like whatever happens, it's like she's gonna, this is my guess, she's gonna have the baby and the baby's gonna go somewhere.
The future.
A cobra's gonna take
Tatooine.
Yeah, Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn's gonna take the baby. Cobra Commander's gonna take the baby and not say so. Cobra Commander's gonna take the baby and blame it on the Joes. The Joes are gonna take the baby. Destro's gonna take the baby.
Someone's gonna take the baby.
And then the next writer won't even pick
the
that
Goblin
thread back
King.
up.
No, I think what's actually going to happen is that Jerwa's not going to be able to resolve this fascinating plot.
Bonus, I'm gonna take your baby. It's meant to be David Bowie.
I thought this was an interesting plot. I liked the writing of how Scalpel tries to, start to deliver this important news and is doing it diplomatically, and Alexander shows up and gets to leave. I really like the body language and the acting that Seeley does in the final panel.
For Alexander?
Where he's leaning his head in towards the door. He has his hand cupped to the door and his ear, and then his other hand is up in a fist, and he's slightly gritting his teeth. Now, it's a little silly or exaggerated because that's a thick Cobra-based door, and I don't
blast
think
door.
But I will forgive that because what the scene requires is that Alexander gets this interesting information, and whether he hears it because the door hasn't finished closing, or he's got a listening device, or he turns on a bug, or turns on the comm through the door, whatever. It does kind of look, though, in the composition of that final panel, there's so much headroom. It sort of looks like there's meant to be one more word balloon, like to the right of Alexander's head.
Destro's saying, maybe this child won't be a disappointment. And Alexander's like, I hate him. I hate him again. That's a nice panel of Scalpel, that middle panel where he's handing the Game Boy to Destro.
Who's the guy in Danger Girl who looks just like Snake Eyes? This is what I see when I've referred to Tim Seeley as drawing a lot like J. Scott Campbell. This panel is a good example where it's the third to last panel on the whole issue, and how the eyes, how the face gets a little slimmer down by the mouth and the chin. There's sort of like a little bit of a furrowed brow. Like I see Tim Seeley here doing a lot of J. Scott Campbell. J. Scott Campbell, of course, has drawn G.I. Joe, and of course, Danger Girl is like one part G.I. Joe, one part James Bond, and one part Charlie's Angels. So every time I flipped through Danger Girl, the original issues that J. Scott Campbell drew, I thought, man, this guy should have just drawn some G.I. Joe.
It would have been nice.
I spy with my little eye.
I've got lots and lots.
I got a couple.
So I Spy, the name of the story is Bad Moon Rising. Bad Moon Rising is a song performed by Creedence Clearwater Revival, the lead single from their album Green River, out in 1969. It is also the name of the second studio album by American rock band Sonic Youth, which came out in 1985.
Thematically, how do you guys see the title relating to this story? What is it? Is the Bad Moon referring to Stahl because he's going to become a bad guy? Is it about the pregnancy? Is it about Wraith?
Trouble on the way, yeah.
Stahl would be the only thing that makes sense to me. But if the title of the story is related to that story, then that, his part should have been a little bigger. That I would have used that title, if it was a focus on him, on like I said, the heel turn, instead of just first part of an unraveling of his mind.
Trouble on the way as well. Also, Loom, this whole thing with Hawk, falling apart a little bit, and the jugglers might now come in and interfere and disband the Joes. Could be the Baroness, the sort of this news, what that could portend for the future. If
Jerwa's answer actually were, it's sort of a generic catch-all phrase for bad stuff coming, I'm also fine with that. I don't need it to specifically link to anything in the story, although that's cool. My first I Spy is after page 6 in issue 34. There's a full-page ad for the G.I. Joe Venom vs. Valor direct-to-DVD and direct-to-VHS animated movie episode. And correct me if I'm wrong, Valor vs. Venom comes after Spy Troops, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Valor vs. Venom, and I actually do have this DVD, although I haven't watched it since it came out. Valor vs. Venom, both Spy Troops and Valor vs. Venom were computer animated.
Mm-hmm.
Those 2 years, that was the only, quote, programming, the only animation that G.I. Joe got, which at the time felt like not enough, but anything was something. And there are a couple people related to G.I. Joe or comics and animation who worked on Valor vs. Venom. Carrie Gamble, comic book artist. Will Mineo, comic book artist and animation storyboard artist and executive producer, and G.I. Joe animation storyboard artist and producer, storyboarded on this. So did Art Nichols, who's also done some comics. That's my first I Spy.
Yeah, I don't know how well it stands up because I've not watched it for a number of years, but at the time it felt like it had some decent production values behind it. It stood up pretty well to the quality of CGI cartoons that were being produced at the time outside of the main studios anyway.
I should say Will Mineo, not just a storyboard artist on Venom vs. Valor, also a producer.
I've never seen that one.
My next I Spy was some new toys.
New toys!
So first up, Destro. Did you notice Destro was in his black turtleneck look from his version 10 figure, 2003?
At the very last scene of page 35, he's back to his classic uniform. I thought it was weird that they put him in the turtleneck. Well, I didn't think it was weird. I liked it because they're trying to stay current with the toys. But then at the very end, when Scalpel tells him that the Baroness is pregnant, he's back in his classic,
Right.
So I don't know why they did that.
Yeah, curious.
But yeah, so we had that Destro, Scalpel, of course.
Yeah, so we've seen. Yeah, so that Destro was 2003 Spy Troops with Grunt. Yeah, Scalpel we've seen quite a few times now, so I wasn't going to call him out, and neither the Crimson Twins in their red outfits. We've seen that a couple of times. I think this might be the first appearance of Roadblock in his look of the time. I think it's closest to version 11 from 2004. He's got this kind of textured vest and armbands made out of bullets.
Not a fan of that look. Was Mirage a figure?
Yes.
That's good. Yeah, Mirage first appeared in 1993 in Mega Marines as a Mega Marines subset. So he is kind of from the original run, but I don't think he appeared in the Marvel book, or maybe just on one panel or something. But he was re-released 4 times from 2002 to 2005 using that original mold but with different colors. So he was very current in terms of being re-released, but also, you know, just a cool looking figure from the original run that just was underutilized. So sort of ripe for, you know, giving a bit of give time to in the book.
And in terms of I Spy, his color scheme here in these 2 issues refers to, it's a little hard to tell which one specifically it is, but refers to his version 2 or 3 or 4 figure, which is green and black and silver, right? It's definitely not, he's definitely not colored like his Mega Marine initial appearance from 1993, which had blues and like neon.
And the final one from me was Ali Viper 2, version 8 from 2004. So quite a cool looking figure. Unusually for figures kind of, you know, up to this point, he had a removable knife on his chest, which was quite a cool play feature. But unlike other previous versions of Ali Viper, he didn't have that. He didn't have a kind of mask that was movable up and down, like a sort of faceplate, protective plate faceplate that could kind of move up and down. So a bit different from previous versions.
I've got 3 more I Spies. I can do them quickly. Issue 34, in the Devil's Due news page, the full page of text that comes after the story, there are photos from the 2004 International G.I. Joe Collectors Convention. And the 3 photos are reproduced very small, but you see Blaylock and a tiny smidge of the convention. So that's one. Issue 35 has a letter printed in the letters page written by Thomas Wheeler. Thomas Wheeler is known in Joe fandom for doing some work on the 1997 and 1999 Toys R Us exclusive action figure re-releases. And also, he's the guy who's written a letter after every issue. Thomas Wheeler sort of famously has written a letter, like he wrote a letter for every issue of the Marvel run, and I believe kept it up for Devil's Due and also IDW. And if you look at all the letters pages, his name shows up a few times.
Yeah, cool. Well, while we're talking about things in the back of the book, I noticed that there was a advert for fan choice figure. This fall, vote to decide which Devil's Due G.I. Joe characters jump from the printed page to the toy shelf.
Yeah, this is in issue 35. It's a full-page ad. It reproduces the Devil's Due's very first cover by J. Scott Campbell and a smidge of 2 other covers. And it encourages people to go to the Devil's Due website and to choose from 10 important milestones in the Devil's Due G.I. Joe saga. And it refers to the fact that Kamakura has, quote, made the leap.
Yeah.
That was my next I Spy. Did you vote at the time, Mark?
I didn't.
You were on the internet.
Yeah, I was on the internet. Why would I have voted? I can't remember voting in this. You'd think I would have done.
Were you buying the toys at the time? Maybe that's why you didn't.
Yeah, I think I was. I think I was buying a few. Not all of them, just the odd one here and there. Yeah, it seems like the sort of thing that I should have done, but I don't actually recall doing it. I might have done. I don't know. It was a long time ago.
My final I Spy, and this is only tangentially related to G.I. Joe, but I'm reading the issues, not the graphic novel collection, not scans on a computer, and
it's not an I Spy from Blood Syndicate issue 2, is it?
I mean,
let's keep it to this book.
That is any comic book that does something effectively can be a comparison for any other comic book.
Chris Cross is a great artist. Those 2 panels were just amazing. Beautiful. You were talking about it, and I was just staring at them like, wow, look at the figure work.
Penciling, inking, coloring in this new Blood Syndicate. And I have read the first 2 issues, and I like the story. And I didn't read the original Blood Syndicate. Anyway, okay, so at the end of issue 34, one of the things I like about reading old comics is the ads and the in-house ads. What else the publisher was doing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that stuff you can see a character or an artist make an early appearance. Sometimes you see things that were published and didn't catch on and you have forgotten about. In a previous Devil's Due issue, there was a one-page ad for Aftermath, and it was some new initiative from Devil's Due. And that ad is repeated here, right? A new breed of hero. This is a full-page ad at the end of issue 34. A new breed of hero is born from the minds of, and then it lists 4 known comic book writers: Chuck Dixon, Joe Casey, Marv Wolfman, Ron Mars. And then the next 2 pages plus the inside back cover and the back cover, so effectively the next 4 pages, are all full-page ads with the covers of issue number 1s of this new, what it turned out to be was, superhero line from Devil's Due. And I'm interested in this for a couple reasons. One, each of these 4 superhero books, Defects, Breakdown, Blade of Kumori, and Infantry, are by solid creators, both writers and artists. Each of these 4 images are fun and compelling, and I would consider giving a shot. Each of these did get published. Each of them had a 4 or 5 or 6 issue miniseries in 2004, 2005. And then some of them 5 years later got collected as trade paperbacks published by Arcana. The 2 things that sort of are most notable to me here is that Stefano Caselli draws Defects. And at this point in Devil's Due, he has done some of, I forget what, Voltron or one of the other non-G.I. Joe books. But pretty soon in the timeline of Devil's Due, he's going to be drawing G.I. Joe. And he doesn't draw G.I. Joe for very long. And then he gets snapped up by Marvel, where he's been ever since, and is drawing Marvel comics right now as I speak in the middle of 2022. The other reason why this is interesting to me is that the final of these 4 ads is for a miniseries called Infantry, right? This December, the revolution begins, written by Joe Casey and drawn by Clement Sauve, or Clement Sauve. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Sauve. He was a really talented artist, and he did some comics in the middle 2000s, and he was character designer on G.I. Joe Renegades.
Oh.
The reason why G.I. Joe Renegades looks so awesome is because of that guy. And he died young in 2011. And he's one of those guys in comics who, at the time, I don't think... The image on the back cover, the ad, it's a cover. He didn't draw the cover, right? So you're not going to see his work until you flip open the first issue of this miniseries, Infantry. But he's one of those comics artists who was drawing in a different style. Like, he wasn't drawing like Brian Hitch and Jim Lee in 2004. He had different influences, and he had an incredible sense of design. And sometimes people like to work in animation because it pays better. Also, sometimes it's just a nice change of pace. So seeing this as a back cover, I thought, oh, I wonder, that would be, and I like Joe Casey as a writer. That would be a fun miniseries to, track down, order it off of eBay if someone had the set, or if I was lucky enough to find it in a dollar bin at a store while on a trip. I would gobble that up.
Cool.
I'm looking and I see 2 accents over the vowels E. So I think it's Clement Sauve, because he was French Canadian. And actually, just 2 weeks ago, a big Kickstarter campaign wrapped up for an art book collecting comic art, animation designs, and sketches of his. Got funded on Kickstarter.
Good job.
And I'm skipping the most obvious thing since we're reading Devil's Due comics. You all have seen his work, listeners, because he did the 3 covers for Dreadnoks Declassified.
Ah, that's good. Good cover. That was kind of the image, the interlinked cover image that builds up to. My next I Spy was Kamakura. So he is appearing in Mufti, and he is named as Sean. And I believe that in the main book up to this point, we have not actually seen seen him unmasked or know his actual name, but it's Sean Collins there. And I think that reveal comes in the Master and Apprentice story, which is sort of running in parallel at this point from May to September 2004, a 4-issue miniseries, which we'll get back to at the end of this main run of the book. I don't think there's too many, apart from the reveal of Sean's name, I don't think there's too many things that are actually, connected to the main book itself.
Mark, are you hinting that if someone was reading both the main book and that Master and Apprentice miniseries concurrently, this scene with Kamakura in Hawk's hospital room would resonate differently or more?
Yeah,
beyond the reveal that it's him, that his name.
No, well, I guess it would resonate differently in terms of the character would be more front and center in people's minds, and it's like, oh yeah, that's Sean Collins. It was his, revealed in the miniseries, and he had that cool 4-issue arc, which was had that art by Stefano Caselli, I think, wasn't it?
Oh right, yeah, he did. Right, thank you. He did the first Master and
that really cool story with the great art, and now he's back in the main book. So it's I think, yeah, for us reading it in the main sort of without that sort of tangent, it means that we've not really seen an awful lot of Kamakura in the last few months up to this point. So yeah, probably does resonate ever so slightly different.
This is good to hear, because going back to when we were talking about the story of these 2 issues, this scene, I thought some Joe should show up and try and guilt trip Hawk into coming back and to be supportive, but I wasn't sure why it was Kamakura. And guys, remind me, was there an earlier scene many issues ago? Who refers to the Green Power Ranger? Is it Hawk?
It's Hawk, yeah. Old Man Hawk, yeah.
Okay, so it's like, okay, they got off on the wrong foot. Hawk wasn't taking the new guy seriously, and here the new guy's trying to be a friend. Okay. I wasn't sure why it was this guy.
Yeah. And as a bit of a tangent, did you the actor, here's another Sean, the actor Sean Bean, he seems to have it both ways with his name. Why is, surely for consistency it would be Scene Bean or Sean Bourne. That aside, so here Sean or Scene is wearing a I Am 10 Ninjas t-shirt, which relates to the Diesel Sweeties online strip, which sold t-shirt merchandise. So the creator of that strip is a guy called Richard Stevens. He said at the time in an interview, I Am 10 Ninjas was one of my most popular t-shirts of the year, but it started out as a throwaway line in the middle of another comic with a different artwork to the shirt. Then the shirt came later, but was very popular. Another one of his popular t-shirts of the time was the phrase "Bacon is a vegetable."
Okay.
And one of my last I Spies is just an observation about last time we talked about Wraiths, the look of Wraith, and the fact that it was a very complex design, akin to Brian Hitch doing, all of the scales on Captain America's armor. And I noticed that here Wraith does have a sort of slightly simplified design compared to the former, so it's a more scaled back, simplified version of the Talent Caldwell version of the design. So all of those sort of like hexagons that sort of were all over his armor, for example, those have kind of now disappeared. So yeah, the look of the costume, as we kind of speculated at the time, has kind of been a bit pared back and kind of does look slightly different with a different artist or art team. And for my final I Spy, I've decided to introduce a brand new feature, and I think I'll make a jingle which I'll insert here. The feature is called Back Once Again with the G.I. Joe Master. It's all about Tim Seeley's idiosyncrasy of his kind of layouts, where he seems to sort of just really favour the use of a character's back to the camera in his shots. So I'd just take this, a couple of moments to linger on some of his use of back to camera here. We have the back of Duke and Colton on page 6 of 34 as they discuss things about Hawk, really. Whatever it takes, Duke, please call me Joe. There's a nice shot of the Crimson Twins looking out of a window with their backs to us. And in issue 35, Kamakura walks out of a door with his back to us dramatically. And then a couple of pages later, Alexander walks out of the door with his back to us dramatically.
Error detected. Error detected. No prize incoming.
Did anybody have any errors?
Not really anything major. I think we touched on the.
Oh wait,
mistakes.
I had one. In issue 35, the van, after they've grabbed Mirage and his green shirt, the van is driving away, and whoever's driving it, Clutch says, "Nice shot, Roadblock," and Mayday is not on top of the van, and then you turn the page and Mayday is on top of the van. Actually, you can chalk that up to Miss Mayday, and then we see her up on the van. So I feel like at the bottom of the previous page, either we need to see her on the van or we need to see her
or swap
climbing
her
up onto the van.
Clutch's panels.
So yeah, it's very small, but she's missing from the last panel of page 11.
So around about page 15-ish of issue 34, where we first meet Mirage and his team in an alleyway behind a dumpster, there's an agent called Haun, H-U-N?
Haun.
So it says, "Horns down. What do we do?" And the dialogue says that horns down, but the shadow beneath her seems to suggest that she's levitating.
She's mostly down.
Yeah, I'm gonna no prize this. That the dialogue is Han's up. What do we do?
She's defying physics.
Quote of the week, 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 quote of the week.
So, favorite line of dialogue. I've got beyond the one that we've already talked about, which is kind of my new favorite. Calm down, dear. Beyond that, I've got two favorite lines. Did either of you single out something?
I just like the line where Flint says, "We do have a good training program, but they're called green shirts for a reason." I thought that was a good line. And other than that, nothing really jumped out at me as far as like clever lines go.
I liked Tomax in 34 during the attempted, right before the two Crimson Guardsmen are pointing their weapons at Destro, and Zaymot says, please accept our apologies, Destro," and Tomax says, "Well, we simply have no belief left in our hearts." And I thought that was great. In the previous page, they're explaining how tumultuous it's been. And I love the idea that, the bad guys do this for money, for power, for glory, for rage and bloodlust. And sometimes I think the use of the word here, belief, no, they believe in Cobra, however misguided. I think that line's great. We have no belief left in our hearts.
Very good. No, so the two lines that I had were both from Clutch, and he says, "I know you two had orders to drop us 30 clicks outside the town, but our boys are knee-deep in sheep dip down there." Right, knee-deep in sheep dip. And then there's another one where it says, this is after they've just been, the van has been blasted out of the air, and this van, which is potentially the greatest van in the history of vans, It's, it's got heavy armor and resealing tires, but, has dropped 15 feet from an exploding helicopter and is able to drive away. So the dialogue is, Major Blood and Scrap Iron are here. That's good. I'd hate to think we were shot down by complete strangers.
That was the one. I forgot about that line. I laughed out loud when I read that. That should have been my my favorite line of dialogue.
I like that too.
It cracked me up.
Yeah.
Since I'm always ready to point out one more thing, which I want to be a little more, you mentioning the van here, I'm reminded that when we first see the van in 34, when the Joes are gearing up and then the van drives up the ramp and then it gets winched to the helicopter, we never clearly see what's stenciled on the side of the van, what their cover is. I can sort of make it out. It's like Leo's spooky delivery, Leo's special delivery, Leeds special delivery. And I'm slightly disappointed because that is an opportunity for, if not a joke, something a little clever.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to be like a hilarious pun, like something that's obvious to Joes and the readers as like Joe's incognito that like Cobra should get, but they wouldn't because it's the story for our benefit. It doesn't have to be like that, but it's, something.
I kept
like
trying to see what it said too.
The way that in the Marvel and IDW Hama G.I. Joe, Cobra gets anagrammed,
Mm-hmm.
It's Broca and all these different things, Arbco. It doesn't have to be. Basically, I just wanted to be that Simpsons joke where there's the FBI is they're like bugging Homer and Marge, and their white van, I think this is from season 5 or 10. There's a white unmarked van parked outside the Simpsons house, and they realize that they've been made, and they panic and they drive away, and then a second later a different white van pulls up in its place and it says "Flowers by Irene" stenciled on the side, right? FBI.
Right.
And then it cuts really fast. I'm sorry to my wife and Simpsons fans if I'm not quite doing that joke justice. So with my magic time machine, Brandon Jerwa and Tim Seeley, I would just stage those 3 panels of the van ever so differently so that I could enjoy what slightly clever thing
at least
have
once
on the side of it.
I was trying to think of a pun, like green shirt, intern.
Green shirt. Oh, GRS, Green Shirt Rescue Service, or Mirage Extraction.
Extraction.
Like you never saw him there, or like you never saw it there. Thank you. Yo, Joey.
Yo, cola, not grape soda.
It's Yo Joey time.
I'll go first because I'm going to go low, and listeners deserve to end on a higher note because you guys like these comics a little more than me. 5. Like I said at the beginning, I like the plot a lot. Everything that happens, I like it. I don't like any of the scripting, and I have some things about the art that don't work for me. And no surprise, I didn't mention the color, but the color is too much. So 5.
As I might cut this out, but as an aside, in our last discussion, I think you gave issue 293 a 5.
I have thought about this, and I don't know how to reconcile that because maybe this is a 4. Maybe these 2 Devil's Due issues are a 4, but I feel like 4 is for comics that don't function very well. And I think the Reinstated, I gave a 2 or a 3, and I feel like on sort of every level, Reinstated didn't work for me. And I don't do half points, so maybe this is a 4.5, and the last IDW Real American issue was a 5 or something.
The Chief scale sort of has anything below 5 is a little bit of a regrettable read. So I sometimes think of that as a barometer.
Well, but also, I didn't like these when I read them, but I very much enjoy talking about them with you guys. Not because I'm like a grump. Like, I like to analyze these, and I very much want you guys to talk me into a different point, to give me some perspectives. Like, no, Tim, but what about this?
And we enjoy it when you sort of lift up the trash can lid and poke your head out, and we can, share these viewpoints.
Why don't you tell our listeners your higher numbers?
Get out of my yard.
Jay, why don't you go next?
I'm going to say 6.5. I liked it. I think I gave the last one 7, probably. This one has a little, just some issues, but still I thought it was pretty good. It was pretty good overall, in my opinion.
Yeah, good. I think I'll be the sort of cheerleader here and go 7. I enjoyed it for all the reasons that I said up front. There's nothing here that seriously brings it down for me. Normally I can point to a couple of things that I really dislike, but don't here. So I enjoyed it. Sort of some good fun action, some interesting setup, and as I say, there's enough there that sort of look forward to actually reading the next story. And so one of the kind of barometers that I use is like, at the end of that story, am I excited enough that I then want to immediately move on to the next issue? And I definitely was there today when I was rereading these. I felt like, I want to sort of skip ahead to the next issue and find out what happens next. But I held myself back so that I wasn't going to sort of start conflating, the next issue with what happened here, which can be a bit of an issue when you do start reading ahead. That you forget what is new versus what is in the issue versus what you've already read. So cool. Good stuff. So that's us done. Next time on Talking Joe Disavowed, we'll continue our look at the Brandon Jerwa era of G.I. Joe with G.I. Joe issues 36 and 37, which is Union of the Snake Part 1 and 2. Over on the regular show, we will continue covering ARA as it comes out. At the moment, we are looking at the high stakes art, which continues the drumbeat down to the milestone issue 300. Where can people find you guys? Tim?
I'm going to start with a new one because our company just crossed 1 million views on YouTube.
What?
My 2 partners and I make videos. The company is Atomic Abe, like Abraham Lincoln. Atomic Abe. So that's atomicabe.com, or our YouTube page is youtube.com/Atomic Abe Productions. Video essays and short humorous content.
Cool.
But also my comic book store is Hub Comics, and my G.I. Joe writing is at arealamericanbook.com.
Excellent. And what a milestone. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks.
Jay, where can people find you?
Break Room Sketches on Facebook.
Good. Been quiet lately. They've been working you too hard at your work.
Yeah. Change of schedule and everything's getting shuffled around again. So we'll get them.
And you just put your foot down and say, "Don't stop making me work. Can't you see I'm trying to draw some G.I.
I tell them, I'm like, look, this is keeping me away from videos and comics and everything else, but they don't listen. They don't listen to me.
And you can find out more about the show at the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk has links to those places: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email. You can leave us voice messages now as well. Or you can be cool, like Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, and Justin, who are getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. They are doing that by going to patreon.com/talkingjoe and backing us. So that is actually us done. But remember,
nobody beats Talking Joe!
Real American podcast!
Which is also, reprinted in other countries as well, across the world. And has 1/3 of this team in England. So, 2/3 American, 1/3 English, for this episode anyway.
What a long outro.
I think that's my new catchphrase. I think I'll just write that one down. So I pretty much fine-tuned it. Laters.
I gotta go. Will you say the Patreon thing and early access and their names?
I did do that. I just said it in a slightly different order.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I was definitely listening.